Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to the Joint House-Senate Conference Committee for the Transportation Bill. And I'd like to call the meeting to order for this Friday session. We will have an informational hearing only, and we will not be taking any votes today on matters before us. However, this hearing is about a variety of issues related to bus transportation. We have several important provisions in our bill on this topic, and Chairman Newman and I agreed that it would be appropriate to hear from various people that have perspectives on provisions in this bill. So I'm going to go over the agenda quickly and then call on Senator Newman if he has any opening comments as well. In particular, we're going to focus the first half of our meeting, or a little more than half, on what's called arterial bus rapid transit. There's a variety of different bus rapid transit modes, but arterial bus rapid transit is of particular interest on the House side, and we'll be hearing more about that. We'll be hearing from the chair of the Met Council, Mr. Zelli, followed by Mr. Carlson, and then we have several members of the public that will be testifying: Ms. Sabatka, Mr. Wagenius, Mr. Schroer, Ms. Scallon, and then we'll hear from Commissioner Mary Liz Holberg from Dakota County. There's a provision related to the Orange Line in this bill that we want to hear from Commissioner Holberg on. And then finally, we'll hear from Representative Sidney Jordan and several people from the city of Minneapolis about a provision related to bus rapid transit in the city of Minneapolis. And that is a House provision as well. So members, we will go through our agenda. What I'll do is after each testifier, if there are questions, we can direct those to the testifiers. I think I'll group this in first the Met Council, then we'll have any Q&A for the Met Council representatives, and then we'll have Q&A for the public representatives, and then we'll take the testimony from Commissioner Holberg and Representative Jordan after that. Chair Newman, do you have any opening comments?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The only comment that I have is I just want to thank you for bringing this forward. I think that this issue of BRTs and bus transit, particularly in the metro area, is really, really important. And it's an important component of the bill that we're in the process of constructing. So I am truly looking forward to hearing what these folks have got to say. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
And thank you, Chair Newman, and thanks for your interest and support of us doing this informational hearing. I know that there are a lot of areas that we will have to work through in our bill, but I hope, and particularly in transit, I think there are different perspectives on the House and Senate, but I do believe that the bus rapid transit is something that we both share in terms of wanting to promote, and that's why I think this is particularly timely. So with that, members, again, I'm not calling for a quorum here because we're not having any votes today. When we conclude our hearing, Chair Newman and I will go over sort of the roadmap for early next week and the weekend. But for now, I'd like to call on Chairman Zelli, the chair of the Metropolitan Council.
Thank you, Chairman Hornstein and Chairman Newman and members of the conference committee. It's a great honor to be with you today, especially to be speaking about arterial bus rapid transit. This is certainly a subject that has gained greater interest due to the success of some of our current service. But just as a setup, and I'm going to be really brief, we're going to hear a great presentation from Charles Carlson here in a minute. But I will say, having been in the bus business for over 35 years, I have learned a number of things. One is that not every bus is the same. And certainly this is true with this service. This is when you think about transit, it really, even though we talk about one line at a time, whether it's light rail, whether it's bus, whether it's streetcar, I mean, we always talk about it in terms of one line, but it really isn't about one line. It's about an interconnected network of service. And we'll have a real chance to kind of show what that network that we're building out in the metro area and how powerful that is, that it's not just the central cities, it's a very broad geography. And what I believe you'll see is how much this arterial bus rapid transit provides more than just commuter service for jobs. It is for ongoing, all day, every 10-minute enhanced access that people are using to live their lives. And if there's any test of that statement, it is that during a period of this COVID, this past year, it has been showing the greatest success and frankly, carrying quite a few people, essential workers, but essential living, that with people who in many cases don't have other choices for mobility. And I think that what has been gratifying is that first line, that A line that opened a number of years ago, has exceeded all of our expectations. And it too also is connected to light rail, it's connected to regular bus, and it is really most importantly connected people in the community. So I could wax on and on, but I will say that I think those who see the benefits of transit will really recognize that this is the future. It's incredibly cost effective, and it is in fact not just Met Transit. This is a collaboration with MnDOT, with local municipalities. When you think about the stations, the guideways, I mean the lanes, the traffic light preemption. I mean, I'm hitting a lot of things that Charles is going to describe, but it really shows that this isn't just your, or in my case, my grandfather's bus. This is really kind of where the bedrock of this interconnected system going forward. So we're really thrilled to kind of give a really more deeper look at the benefits it has and kind of what this means for our entire system. So with that, I get a chance to introduce Charles, but appreciate being here with you, and certainly open to answer questions afterwards.
Thank you very much, Chair Zelli. And Mr. Carlson is next up. And welcome to the committee, Mr. Carlson. Please state your name for the record and proceed with your testimony. I'll just also say by way of introduction, Mr. Carlson is the Director of BRT Projects for Metro Transit. Welcome to the committee, Mr. Carlson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Charles Carlson, Director of BRT for Metro Transit. Very happy to share some of our successes today with Arterial BRT. Arterial BRT is at its core a frequent, reliable service. So the purpose of BRT is to deliver on our promise that services are reliable and easy to use. We do this a number of different ways, through all-day frequent service, through reduction in delay, primarily by reducing the time it takes to get on and off vehicles and the time it takes to progress down the street and reduce our red light delay. It's also important that our service is welcoming and comfortable and safe. And waiting for the bus is often one of the least favorite parts, but we make that more comfortable and secure through investing in high quality stations at every BRT stop. It's easy to pay by paying ahead of time at a ticket machine on the platform. Shelters are protective and enhanced with heat and light. We also have security features at stations, including cameras and emergency telephones and other features. Finally, the third major component of the product is specialized vehicles and the ability to board from every door of the vehicle. That significantly improves the time it takes to load our passengers and continue on the corridor. So we have two examples of BRT in the system right now. of arterial BRT, the A line and the C line, and both of these has been a significant success. When we opened the A line in 2016, as well as when we opened the C line in 2019, we saw an immediate jump of 30% ridership growth, and we'll see a bit more about that in the next slides. When we put these together, we have over 3 million rides in 2019 and sustained over 2.4 million rides in 2020. So despite the pandemic, continued to see high usage of these lines. Put together, these two lines combined represent about a $60 million investment with a state share that was a major component of the A line. And we completed these lines on time and under budget. So we've been able to be good stewards and have progressed these projects forward very efficiently and smoothly. In terms of those ridership results, this shows the A line on both a pre-operation and then during operations basis. The A line does not serve a downtown, so ridership is notable in this case, where significant new rides came with connections to other services, as well as destinations along this corridor. We had our highest ridership serving the state fair actually in the summer of 2019. So a big feature of this line is that we can provide that big state fair push for this service. This chart shows how ridership immediately jumped up and then actually grew on an ongoing basis for quite some time. It began to dip back down again as COVID was approaching, but it's sustained growth on a trend basis from its opening, and that's notable in this case. This shows the C line. So on the C line corridor, the C line does serve serves downtown Minneapolis, but most of the gains that showed up when we began service in the summer of 2019, most of the gains in ridership were actually off peak and on weekends. So in aggregate, there was a significant jump in ridership, but where we're seeing that growth is really where people are living their lives and going on other kinds of trips, shopping, social visits, things like that. Not just limited to the 9 to 5 type commute, which we'll talk more about in a little bit. The other thing I would note important for the C line is we had 10-minute bus frequency on Penn Avenue prior to opening the C line. So there are about the same number of overall buses traveling in this corridor. But when we implemented that as BRT, we still saw a significant ridership increase. So it's not just the service levels, it's the other features that contribute to the success of arterial BRT. This slide shows, based on those successes, we've done quite a bit more planning, and most recently, just in the first part of this year, the council has adopted direction on the next steps for arterial BRT, following a significant public engagement process going back to 2019. And the council's full network of potential arterial BRT lines is shown on this slide. So there are up to 15 BRT lines spanning well over 100 miles that are shown in this line. The lines shown in green are the newly named lines, the F, G, and H lines that we'll mention in a little bit. The lines in either solid or dashed gray are the named lines that exist otherwise that have been continuing to advance, and some are under construction now. And then in dotted gray, the lightest shade on this is actually 7 additional lines that the council would intend to name and then pursue between 2030 and 2040. And our next study of those lines would come in 2025, knowing that the land uses, the transportation network continues to evolve, and that we would be picking up the next lines, having made the near-term selections of F, G, and H in a handful of years. When this full system is implemented, we would have a fully realized 2040 metro network. And this is the combination of guideway lines and light rail, but also actually more mileage of arterial BRT would comprise about 60% of the mileage of this system. Within this total system, we have 5% of the region's land area, but within that small share of the region, we have 28% of the region's residents. We have over 3/4 of the central city population, and importantly, nearly half of the region's BIPOC residents, 65% of the region's Black residents, and 58% of Indigenous residents. So significant opportunity to improve transit in these areas in the region, despite having, from a land area standpoint, a relatively small footprint. And what's significant about this is access to opportunity. So this system would also be serving nearly half of the people with low incomes in the region. So providing a affordable, safe, reliable, and useful alternative to owning a personal vehicle opens up significant opportunity with other uses for that money. 30% of the region's households, including 60%, so 3 out of every 5 renter households in the region, and also 3 out of every 5 zero-car households. So significant access then for these residents to close to half the jobs in the region. You can, on this network, access 750,000 jobs, and those are the existing jobs, not to mention job growth over time. So this fully realized network, including the 15 arterial BRT lines that are potential by 2040, opens up this access to significant shares of the population of the region. These lines are also really important in our current, in terms of the number of current bus riders served by this network. So this chart shows the share of pre-COVID bus riders that would be served first by the existing lines, around 7%, with the current lines that are in development, the D, B, and E lines, that grows to 22%. With the other lines that we've named that we'll share today, this system, just by 2030, would be serving 1/3 of bus riders on a pre-COVID basis. So in just 8 corridors, we have 1/3 of our bus rides, and those are the rides and lines we'd be improving by implementing the arterial BRT corridors that we've named. The 7 additional BRT corridors would increase that share to 50%. So half our rides are on 15 corridors. Those are the lines that we've identified for arterial BRT. So this is all on a pre-pandemic basis. During the pandemic, the importance of these lines is even greater. The existing lines serve 10% of bus riders, and when we put all the lines together, we're talking about close to 2/3 of our current bus riders that would be served by existing, planned, or potential BRT corridors. And so these are essential transportation for tens of thousands of essential trips every day. Each of these routes then benefiting from the improvements offered by arterial BRT. There's a lot of discussion these days about the future of transit and the future of work. What will it look like to return from telework, and what will that mean for transportation? And this slide speaks to this a bit. We find in our onboard survey work prior to COVID that 70% of transit trips are something other than a 9-to-5 office commute. So it's easy to think of the 9-to-5 as the dominant trip pattern in transit, when in fact it's less than 1/3. The majority of trips are made from other trip types. So social, community, and errand trips are equal in that to that 9-to-5 commute. Off-peak commuting, school, medical appointment, K-12 type school trips. When we put all those together, those are a much bigger share of our ridership existing, with an even smaller share coming from event ridership or airport ridership. So when we think about the pride we take in event ridership, and certainly we provide successful service to large crowds of people at events, it's important to know that there's 99 times that many people using the system day in and day out, and equal pride in providing reliable, effective, and safe service for those as well. So The important part of this slide is that with Arterial BRT, we're serving a wide range of trip purposes as well. Much of that goes beyond the 9 to 5 commute, and supporting those multiple trip purposes is really something we do effectively and have seen relative to ridership growth on corridors like the C line when we've opened them. This slide shows how bus ridership has changed and light rail and commuter rail ridership has changed during COVID-19. So there has been declines across the system with COVID as people are traveling a lot less and perhaps are using other modes of travel. What we find on a percentage basis is that BRT has dropped the least in terms of all of our service types. So that's what's shown here, followed by local bus, which is a bit over 50%, light rail in the 65% or so range, and then a significant drop to our commuter express bus services and our North Star commuter rail, which are down quite a bit more. So BRT has been the most robust mode from a sustaining ridership perspective because it has direct relationship to essential trips, essential workers, and transit-dependent populations that are using BRT day in and day out, and not really something that can be substituted with telework. So the next section of the presentation will just mention a bit about some of the lines that are underway, that are in progress and coming up next. The Metro D line is currently under construction. This will upgrade our highest ridership bus route, Route 5. More than 120,000 people live along this line and will have significant job access improvement. So we're under construction now, planning to open in late 2022. Final funding for this project was completed in the October 2020 bonding bill. So that's been instrumental in getting the project out to bid. We had favorable bids and we're now under construction along Chicago Avenue, Emerson Fremont Avenue, and we'll continue that work through next year. Here's a bit of information about the demographics of riders of Route 5. So pre-COVID, we carried about 12,000 trips on a typical weekday. The slide here shows the difference from regional demographics. So the region overall is a little over 70% white, just as this example here, but riders of Route 5 are less than 30% white. So these lines serve, in this line in particular, serves a demographic base that's very different from the region overall. And providing transit improvements on these corridors provides a significant improvement for a wide cross-section of the region's population. The Metro B line is the next line that we'll highlight. So this is Metro Transit's second highest ridership bus route, going from the uptown area of Minneapolis to downtown St. Paul. This would actually extend a bit further west to connect with the Southwest Light Rail line. Along this corridor, there are about 106,000 people. 42% of the people living along this line are BIPOC individuals. The project budget is complete. Again, the funding for that project came through the October 2020 bonding bill. We've released the draft plan for the corridor for community input. There's iterative phases with significant community engagement that inform these plans. We're reviewing proposals for engineering right now towards beginning construction for this line in 2023. The next line would run from the University of Minnesota area through downtown Minneapolis to the Southdale area with the Metro E line upgrading Route 6. So this line is currently in a planning phase. We're targeting construction in 2024 if full funding is obtained so that we can work together closely with county and city projects that are upcoming, particularly construction of Hennepin Avenue through the uptown area will benefit greatly from funding certainty for this line so they can progress as though there were one construction project, at least as how the public would view it, by limited disruption and efficient progression of the line. This project has an estimated cost around $60 million, and we've been able to identify $20 million with $40 million as the remaining need to complete E-line funding. The next line that we'll pursue and planning will begin later this year is the Metro F line. The council selected this line as the next line in March 2021. It would significantly upgrade Route 10 and it would extend up to Blaine from downtown Minneapolis via Central Avenue, 53rd Avenue, and University Avenue. So the first BRT line that would enter Anoka County would be implemented through the Metro F line. We carry over 7,000 rides a day in this corridor, and that's expected to grow quite a bit. We have a significant opportunity for planning, engineering, and constructing this line in close partnership with MnDOT. MnDOT is currently evaluating both of these corridors for potential improvements, and with full funding, we can implement a project that will improve safety and mobility for residents and businesses along both of these important streets, University Avenue and Central Avenue. This project also has an estimated cost of around 80 million, with 25 million just recently secured through a federal grant and a 55 million remaining need. Targeting construction in 2025 is to align with that federal grant. The G line is the next line, so serving Ramsey County and Dakota County, upgrading two important routes. This line would be the next step with planning starting in 2022. There's a lot of work happening in downtown St. Paul with reconstruction of Robert Street in a couple years ahead. Naming the G line now enables us to partner closely with the city on the planning for these lines so we can move forward closely together. The last line I'll mention today is the Metro H line. This would run from downtown Minneapolis to Sunright Transit Center along Como and Maryland Avenue. So this would not serve downtown St. Paul, but would significantly improve crosstown service and work with the G line connecting into downtown St. Paul for a new type of trip and a new type of service across east-west St. Paul. So a great opportunity here to reach new destinations and a line that we'd like to implement before 2030. So when we put these lines together, we have 40 new miles of BRT lines, and those last 3 new lines that we've named recently. This system would serve 4 counties. We would next, again, as I mentioned earlier, update this plan around 2025. So when we put the 3 corridors that we've just named with the other ones mentioned earlier, this system provides significant access to jobs. So these maps show current the planned metro network and then the job access increases that occur from implementing the F, G, and H lines. So there's places in the region where you can reach over 800,000 jobs within an hour on transit. And that's the type of reach that is made possible through fast and reliable service. And the areas with increases that are shown here will certainly benefit from those kinds of improvements. One of the last message in this system is the value that arterial BRT offers. So in the 4 lines that we're looking to complete funding for to implement by 2030, those 4 lines together would serve around 50,000 rides a day. So a significant number of rides on our system. And we could do that for an investment of around $320 million. For which we're looking to complete the funding of around 250 million. So 250 million to carry 50,000 riders a day is a great value in terms of the improvements. It's a major investment in our existing and ongoing ridership, even during the pandemic, and a good value for the state. Finally, I'll just leave you with this network diagram of what the 2030 Metro vision could be with our next lines that have been named implemented. This is the future of our system, and you can really begin to see going from a line or a couple of lines really into a full network that serves the region. And we can really begin to compound the effects of these individual investments by progressing them in coordination and implementing them as a whole. And with that, Mr. Chair, I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you very much, Mr. Carlson. So members, if anyone has questions of either Mr. Carlson or Chair Zelli, we'll pause and take those as I see the hands raised. So we'll do that, and then we can get on to some other testimony as well. Chairman Newman, you're first up.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. For either Chairman Zelli or Mr. Carlson, you made mention that the service would be on the BRTs every 10 minutes. Can you tell us what hours of the day the every 10-minute schedule would be? And is that for weekdays and weekends or one or the other?
Mr. Carlson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Senator Newman. Service generally it starts the day a little less frequent, every half hour or every 15 minutes, and then kind of ramps up to 10 minutes across the majority of the day before then ramping back down again. So generally, I believe it's around 7 p.m. or so that it starts ramping back down, and then the last trips are typically around midnight or thereabouts. It varies a bit line by line because it's tailored to the actual demand that occurs per corridor and the overall span of the service day.
Mr. Carlson, when would the service start in the morning?
Generally, the first trips are around 4 or 5 a.m. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Mr. Chairman.
Chair Newman.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And just a quick follow-up, Mr. Carlson. You have described the budget for the various lines, 75 million for D, 65 million B, et cetera. You went through each line and outlined the budget for it. Is the budget that you described for each of those lines, are they all for planning, engineering, and construction?
Mr. Carlson.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Senator Newman, the budget is the full spectrum of delivering the service. So it includes the planning, the environmental work, the engineering and design, construction administration, the construction contracts themselves, as well as the fleet. So the buses to operate the service and any related equipment.
And Mr. Chairman, one final.
Chair Newman.
Thank you for that, Mr. Carlson. And if I understood you correctly, for the various budget items that you described, these BRT lines will cover approximately 40 miles. Is that correct?
Mr. Carlson.
Mr. Chair, Senator Newman, the 40 miles reflects the 3 lines that the council has recently named, the F line, G line, and H line. Combined with other services that are underway or planned, the total mileage for A through H is about 106 miles.
Very good. Thank you, Mr. Carlson. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Chair Newman. Next up, I have Senator Bingham.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. It's more of a point of clarification because I have more, these are fantastic lines. Go BRT, love it. But I have more questions about the legislation that's contained in the conference committee. So I guess when that's appropriate, I would have some questions, but I just wanted that out there for when we get to that point.
Thank you, Senator Bingham. Yeah, we can talk a little bit about that perhaps after the public testimony. Okay, I'm looking through our participant list and I don't see any additional hands. So thank you very much, Mr. Carlson. If I've missed anyone or left anyone out, please pipe up.
Mr. Chair.
Yes, Representative Cagle.
Sorry, I didn't put my hand up, but I also just wanted to emphasize how the improvements along these corridors also improve safety. The F line that's coming up through my area up to Blaine has had a very extensive track record with pedestrian fatalities. And if you ever drive the corridor, the bus amenities along it are pretty much just signs on the side of the highway. And so not only is it a good way to get folks in my area around, but it also is a huge safety upgrade in our area. So I'm very excited about these projects.
Thank you, Vice Chair Cagle. Okay, last chance here for any members who would like to ask a question of either Chair Zelli or Mr. Carlson. Okay, both Chair Zelli and Mr. Carlson, thank you so much for joining us today and for that informative slideshow, Mr. Carlson, and for your work. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Mr.
Thank you.
Okay, our next section here, we have several members of the public who have signed up to testify. And first up is Suzanne Sabatka, the Policy and Research Director for Move Minnesota. Welcome to the committee, Ms. Sabatka.
Thank you, Mr. Chair and members. I believe Mr. Howe is going to help me out with my slides here. But for the record, while waiting for those to come up, again, Suzanne Sabatka, Policy and Research Director at Move Minnesota. Advance to the first slide. So you may or may not know that Move Minnesota is an advocacy organization that pushes for a fair and just transit system for all Minnesotans. We're one of the leading organizations in a coalition called Transportation Forward, with some additional organizations that share our advocacy. I would give a big, if you want to go back one last slide, thanks. I would echo a lot of what Mr. Carlson said about the importance of BRT and how widely it is used. Our organization has a bit more aggressive timeline for when we'd like to see this happen. We think this is pretty urgent to get folks more access to transit, given the racial, social, and economic inequalities that it can help solve for, in addition to a lot of our climate goals and greenhouse gas emission reductions that are set in statute. Next slide, please. So there's been a lot of talk about ridership and the way we'll continue to view transit in the post-pandemic world. And as Mr. Carlson pointed out, transit ridership remains high, both on ABRT and regular route buses. We know in the heart of the pandemic, Metro Transit was still giving about 80,000 rides a day. And now that we're through it a bit more, it's more like 100 to 110,000 rides per day. And again, as Mr. Carlson pointed out, in the heart of the pandemic, the lowest dip in ridership, the ridership that maintained more consistent levels was ABRT compared to even local route bus service and light rail. And as we're thinking about this, I'd also just like to remind the committee that Metro Transit innovated in the heart of the pandemic and introduced some new service levels that we hadn't seen before. Metro Mobility was giving free, safe rides to healthcare essential workers to get them to and from their workplaces. And Metro Mobility and Transit Link pivoted to food delivery and grocery delivery to people who already qualified for those services. So while we may have seen ridership dip, we need to keep that in mind, that transit adapted. And we also know that transit access is a racial, social, and economic equity issue. A disproportionate number of transit riders are people of color, while BIPOC Minnesotans make up about 25% of the population of the Twin Cities. They're 44% of Metro Transit riders. And similarly with car ownership, we know 30% of people of color in the Twin Cities do not have access to a car, compared with 12% of white Minnesotans living in the Twin Cities. Next slide, please. And we also know that Americans want better transit. This is something that your constituents are asking for. So the data here on the slide is from a study, a poll that was done and released in March 2020, so very close to the start of the pandemic, where about 1,000 Americans surveyed thought that their own community would benefit from public transit, 66%, and 77% of those polled thought that the country as a whole would benefit from improved public transit like ABRT. Next slide, please. And other metro areas are acting. We would not be alone if we did more for transit. Just this past fall in Austin, Texas, they approved a property tax increase that will go towards $7.1 billion in capital investments in their systems. And Denver, Colorado also approved a 2.5 cent sales tax increase to boost their city's transit investments, primarily with the goal of combating climate change. Next slide, please. And we know Minnesotans want more transit. I will hearken back to the MnDOT report on the pathways to decarbonizing transportation, in which they did surveys all across the state and public meetings and online surveys, and found that actually 3 of the most popular options that Minnesotans wanted for decarbonizing transportation were actually walkable and bikeable communities, electrifying the bus and train system, and just improving public transit in general. So this is something that your constituents want. Next slide, please. And of course, what we think that we need to do now is seize the opportunity. Minnesotans will increasingly use transit if we have a system that works. Like Mr. Carlson pointed out, ABRT lines have more frequency, they're more reliable, they're highly efficient. And we want Minnesotans who are now recontemplating their commutes, the way they make their trips. We think now is the time to do so, and perhaps contemplate the $9,500 the average Minnesotan spends on maintaining a vehicle in a year. Maybe that's an expense that they could begin to do without. And we know that those personal economic recovery and savings can fuel a large recovery. Those additional dollars in your pocket could be spent on housing, healthcare, or starting a new business. So those are certainly areas that we know we spend a lot of general fund dollars in, and investments in transit can reduce the burden on those additional areas. We need to make sure that we have adequate funding to build out the system quickly. A half-cent sales tax could build out as many as 15 lines in the next 10 years. Certainly there's discussion on how those dollars will be spent, but we think that is a good way to do it. And we just certainly encourage you to make transit a priority and maintain existing funding levels. That is what I have for you. If my last slide just is a big thanks to everyone for the time you're putting in here. I'm happy to continue the conversation.
Well, a big thank you to you, Ms. Sabatka. What we'll do here, members, is we have several more testifiers, and then we'll hold questions until they're finished, and then you can direct your questions to any of the individual testifiers. Next up, we have Mr. Peter Wagenius from the Sierra Club North Star chapter. Welcome to the committee, Mr. Wagenius.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. My name is Peter Wagenius. I'm the Legislative Director at Sierra Club. In support of the House proposal on bus rapid transit, I would like to share a few thoughts about Orange Line bus rapid transit, which will open later this year on 35W from Burnsville to downtown Minneapolis. I recognize that Orange Line BRT is a highway BRT line, and the House proposal focuses on arterial BRT. But there are crucial lessons to be learned from both versions of BRT regarding the advantages of BRT generally. Number one, BRT brings people together. Orange Line BRT is a story of turning controversy into consensus on 35W. I was on point for transportation at the city of Minneapolis for 16 years, so I know all too well that different groups had radically different visions of 35W's future. Some wanted a wider freeway, others wanted rail transit, LRT, on 35W. Years went by until we got to a better outcome. It was BRT. It was by coming together around true bus rapid transit, we built a strong, bipartisan, urban-suburban coalition around a vision that served the whole corridor. Number two, people ride BRT. Without BRT on 35W, that corridor already had the highest ridership of any corridor except the 2 LRT lines. And even with that high ridership base, 35W also had the highest potential ridership increase, second only to the central corridor between the 2 downtowns. When Orange Line BRT is added, total transit ridership on 35W is projected to rival Hiawatha LRT, but at a smaller capital cost. These large ridership numbers make sense when you think about the experience of a current transit rider. Let's say you're a resident of Burnsville and you like the express service to your job in downtown, but what if your child gets sick in the middle of the day? What if your boss asks you to work late? The lack of all-day service is a disincentive to use transit at all. Adding a layer of all-day service provides the last crucial piece of the puzzle for a transit rider to know, I can get home when I need to. Orange Line, for these reasons, Orange Line BRT will become the flagship of our BRT fleet, setting a new high standard for just how good transit service can be, but again, without the high capital cost of rail. Number 3, BRT is proven. We don't need to speculate about the impact of BRT. As a previous testifier indicated, it's been proven all around the world to increase ridership, including the A line and C line here in Minnesota. Number 4, BRT is cost effective. BRT is the most cost-effective way to provide high-quality transit in Minnesota, giving transit riders and potential transit riders what they are looking for: more frequent and faster service to more destinations. Why? Because BRT can be built on the right-of-way the public already owns. No epic years-long negotiations with freight rail over rail access. BRT is easy to expand, and Orange Line is intended to expand to Lakeville in the future. As ridership grows within the city of Minneapolis, a future station at 38th Street can be added as planned in the study authored by Representative Hornstein and then Representative Holberg all those years ago. 5, everything that is true of BRT generally is even more true of arterial BRT. Arterial BRT is even more cost-effective than highway BRT. Why? Because we are already running slow transit service on the corridors where arterial BRT will provide faster service. Slow speed costs more money through more driver hours. When you increase speed, you save money, which can be redeployed into greater frequency, which is what most drives ridership. 6, paying for arterial BRT, as proposed by the House, is the right way to do it. Unlike how we fund other services on a statewide basis, Metro legislators have said clearly that the metro area will pay for its own transit through a regional metro-only sales tax. If you live outside the area, you don't need to be concerned that your constituents don't want to pay for transit they don't use, because they don't have to pay. Nobody's asking for a statewide tax. Chair Hornstein's bill takes that one step further by limiting the sales tax to a smaller geography, the transit capital levy communities. This is consistent with best practices from other states and other regions around the country who found that negotiating over geography was a key to finding a compromise. Finally, paying for arterial BRT this way will free up space in the bonding bill for more highway BRT projects like the Orange Line to be built around the region. Let me conclude with this. Let's remember that in funding transit, we are not just way behind other regions on climate action, which is the primary concern of Sierra Club. Failing to invest in transit also puts us way behind on public health, equitable access to jobs, economic competitiveness, and the ability to retain young workers. It is well documented that unlike my generation and older generations, young people choose where they live first, then find a job. And young Minnesotans that we paid to educate in our public schools shouldn't have to leave Minnesota to find the modern region they're looking to live in. We know that transit is a big part of what they're looking for. We should provide it here, and we can. And thank you very much, Chair Hornstein, for the opportunity to testify.
Thank you very much, Mr. Wagenius. Appreciate it. And our next testifier is Mr. Will Schroer, the Executive Director of East Metro Strong, and he'll be joined by B. Kyle from the St. Paul Chamber of Commerce. Mr. Schroer, did you want to go first? And then we'll have Ms. Kyle.
Yeah, I'm not, B had a conflict come up. I don't know if she's going to be able to join us. We'll keep an eye out for her.
Well, we'll start with you regardless, Mr. Schroer. Welcome to the committee. Please state your name for the record and proceed with your testimony.
Thank you, Chair Hornstein, and thank you, Chair Newman. My name is Will Schroer. I am the Executive Director of East Metro Strong. We are a partnership between 6 East Metro cities and Washington and Ramsey County and a number of large employers, including 3M and M Health Fairview. And our partners at the St. Paul Chamber, of course, represent more than 1,000 other businesses across the region. And I appreciate the opportunity to share a few thoughts with you on this subject today. And I thank the staff for taking care of the slides. So next slide, please. So you've heard, we didn't have a time to compare notes among each other. And a number of the testifiers come from different perspectives in any case, but I'm pleased to see that we're pointing at some of the same facts, which I won't belabor, but it's worth noting that the ridership numbers really do, as a couple of people now have mentioned, underline that people really love this kind of service. Before COVID, I actually took the time to go out and I rented a little camera crew, and we did kind of ambush man and woman in the street interviews at some of the A-line stations, and because I was genuinely curious how people felt about it. And to a person, they were really, really happy with the service. And if you have 5 minutes after spending the afternoon inside on this nice day, you might go watch this video, which takes about 5 minutes at betterbussesmsp.com. Next slide, please. Given our partnership between the larger employers in the East Metro and the St. Paul Chamber, I want to underline a couple of business perspectives here. So employers have asked for more BRT. I want to thank Metro Transit and the staff there for really doing an exceptional job in thinking through where BRT is needed and where it ought to go. They're really good at reaching out. One of those conversations a year ago was, should the B line go all the way to downtown St. Paul, and or should it stop at Snelling? And our downtown executives stepped up and said, no, we really need good transit access to be the successful employers that we want to keep being. And we were tickled, of course, that Metro Transit heard that message, and we will now get the B line coming all the way to downtown and really connect a lot of neighborhoods that need this investment. But this you don't hear from executives all the time on matters of public policy. This one rose to the level that they really wanted to make clear that they need more BRT, and we're pleased to be getting it. Next slide, please. And that outreach to the residents of the region continues. And again, thank Charles Carlson for running a great program. He didn't go into all the detail that he might have, as much detail as he went into, and I want to highlight a couple of extra things here. So the outreach on what the next 3 named lines should be kept going during COVID. And not for the last time, I'll thank Metro Transit for keeping that going. And what the input that they got from residents really underline that residents understand the value of these investments and ask for them, and can name pretty specifically the benefits that they see. So the Como, Maryland line will be connecting folks to the U of M much more effectively, and that's good for everybody in the state. They're asking for Rice Robert because there really aren't very many good north-south connections in the East Metro right now. And they recognize that the residents need better residents north of downtown really don't have very good access to retail. There are a whole lot of retail establishments on South Robert across the river, and it's just hard to connect those two right now. Rice Robert would address that need, which the residents themselves understand. Next slide, please. And then asking for the line that will go north to Fridley. You can read the gentleman from Fridley's observations yourself. But these are folks that live in the suburbs, own businesses in the suburbs, and understand that to succeed and to get the workers there that they need and to get their clients there, the bus rapid transit is really something that will benefit them as business owners. And took the time to write to Metro Transit and say, please accelerate this line because it's good for us out in Fridley. Next slide, please. So this point has been mostly made, but I would just perhaps differ from some of the other presenters. Just we all have different. We're reading the data on when work will come back and will people go back to the office a little bit differently. Now we're all trying to foretell the future. We don't know what will happen, but the network that Metro Transit is planning, I think, will be a much more flexible network than the largely still hub and spoke network that we have right now. Now, Metro Transit's done a great job serving a lot of different parts of the region, and they're really starting to connect neighborhoods without necessarily going through downtown. This future network will really double down on that approach, allowing people to really get to all of the different parts of their lives without having to go downtown first. So if it turns out that, in fact, the post-COVID employment situation means that we don't work quite as much downtown as we used to, BRT will be in a position to serve those new patterns of work and shopping and everything else that we do in our lives. Next slide, please. Not mentioned so far as I can tell so far, is that the buses that we use to implement the BRT lines here are made here in Minnesota by Minnesotans. I believe this committee is probably familiar with the fact that New Flyer makes these buses in St. Cloud and parts of them in Crookston, I think, as well. What is perhaps a little bit less well known is that all of the components that go into those buses are made across the state as well. And after you're done watching the little video on why people like BRT, you can go read the Minnesota Transit Supply Chain Report. It has a little link at the bottom there. And next slide, please, John. These are all the places in Minnesota that build and manufacture transit bus components. And if you squint at your screen, which is what I'm doing right now, you'll see that of the 60-some manufacturers, 4 of them are in Minneapolis and St. Paul, and everybody else is either out in the suburbs or a little bit further out in the 7-county region. And then after that, really spread pretty well throughout much of greater Minnesota. We didn't vary the size of these dots to reflect the size of the employment. If we did, of course, you'd see a really big dot in St. Cloud and another one in Crookston, but more to just illustrate the geographic breadth of the kind of manufacturing in transit that goes on by Minnesotans. Next slide, please. I'd like to add just a little bit of extra depth to the cost effectiveness point that was made. And this was a project that was commissioned by the Itasca project and then funded both through East Metro Strong and the Minneapolis Regional Chamber. Next slide. And if you're interested in reading the whole thing, I'd be happy to get you a copy. The Business Journal did a very nice summary of it, and you can get most of the content out of the headline that for every dollar invested in transit, the Twin Cities gets $2.90 in benefits. Now, the Twin Cities getting those benefits is a little bit misleading because, next slide, please. It turns out that most of those benefits go to folks using the road system because the road system itself works better. And yeah, most of the people using the regional road system live and work in the region, but a lot of folks are actually coming from greater Minnesota. They're shipping agricultural products through the city or to a transload terminal in the region. They're shipping windows from War Road through to Chicago, and they have to come through the city. So the better improved traffic benefits go all over the state. A healthy chunk, of course, go to people using transit. And the bottom line then, the last finding from this study was that the lower vehicle operating costs alone exceed the cost of actually building the transit, and everything else is kind of gravy. So just a little extra detail on the cost effectiveness of these investments. Next slide, please. So I'd like to sum up that bus rapid transit is certainly used, and it's used enthusiastically. People who have a choice use it, and people who have less choices use it. And recognizing that it's asked for by folks who understand its benefits, and we know we'll use it. And finally, it creates jobs across Minnesota, jobs that support a cost-effective investment. Last slide, please. So I want to thank you, and I'm sorry that B couldn't join us.
Mr. Chair, I believe B is Ms. Collins is on the line as I understand it.
Oh, fantastic. Well, then I will turn this over to B, And I just want to say what a pleasure it's been working with her to carry this message. And there she is. Hi, Dee.
Thank you.
Good afternoon.
Welcome to the committee, Ms. Kyle. Please state your name for the record.
Sir, appreciate the courtesy of the opportunity. For the record, my name is B. Kyle. I'm the president and CEO of the St. Paul Area Chamber. I deeply apologize not being here earlier, and thank you, Will, for being such a good partner in this. I'm not going to belabor information you've already received. From my perspective, I think the most important message I'd like to convey is just a reminder that the single biggest factor that determines the economic health of our state is our ability to recruit and retain talent. And I know this is not news to you that talent is a real challenge for folks right now. And then as we look at our competitive position, to my mind, I'm thinking we need to consider the following 4 points as we plan on further investment in BRT. Number one is that it elevates the economic opportunity of our residents. And number two, it supports further job growth. We've seen it, that where lines begin, amplified opportunity follows, and the converse is equally true. And I really would like to encourage as vehemently as I can, and we need more investment in the East Metro counties of Washington, Ramsey, and Dakota. You know, if we look purely from an economics perspective, you've got a supply economics model in the East Metro. Where we invest, development follows. And so we're really asking for your consideration there that we need more of both in the East Metro specifically, which provides more equitable access to opportunity across the region. Ultimately, beyond building where people are, we encourage you to build creatively and proactively for where you want more growth to happen. And then my final point really is that they can't wait. Time equals cost, and these costs won't just be monetary, they'll also be lost time and productivity and opportunity. And one final fun fact to share is this idea that the next generation is truly embracing transit. There was a recent study at the University of Michigan that indicates the millennials and Gen Z, in terms of getting driver's licenses, that number is decreasing. And in fact, there is a strong community of next gen leaders promoting transit as the sole transit option. And for us to continue to woo folks, the next generation, investment in public transit is so very important. So I just thank you for the opportunity to share our thoughts and speak with you this afternoon. So thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you so much, Ms. Kyle. And we appreciate your taking the time out this afternoon to testify.
Absolutely.
Members, we have two more testifiers, then I'll open up for questions. Next, we have Ms. Maureen Scallon-Fowler, the President and CEO of the Dakota County Regional Chamber. Welcome to the committee.
Thank you, Chair Hornstein, and thank you, Chair Newman. It's an honor and a privilege to be here today. And actually, the only thing I probably could say at this point is ditto. My colleague and friend B. Kyle did a great job, and I really echo what her comments are and strongly agree with that as well. I also want to let you all know that Dakota County Regional Chamber of Commerce has worked, put a lot of time and effort over the last couple of years in working with East Metro Strong and Will Schroer on our transit initiative. So I also want to acknowledge Will Schroer, but just a couple of additional thoughts and comments as we're talking about bus rapid transit and really what does that mean for Dakota County. And I found it very interesting as I was looking over the maps that were showed throughout other presentations and looked how kind of stark Dakota County is as it relates to transit and connectivity. And that was what the impetus was 3 years ago when I started at the chamber, that our employers have said time and time again, we need more and better transit in Dakota County if we're going to be competitive. Our friends over at Greater MSP, our Regional Economic Development Organization, says that job accessibility by transit is critical to competitiveness. And we highly agree with that. We kind of drill this down into what we call our three-legged stool. And our three-legged stool for Dakota County that we feel very strongly that you have to have a balance of all three legs is having adequate and reliable transit services. You need jobs at all levels, and you need economic development. And most importantly, you need the housing. You need the housing. You need the, from the top line all the way down to the affordable housing. The growth in Dakota County is going to be huge over the next several years. And no offense to my friends over in St. Paul, but Dakota County is just inches away from you, B. Kyle. But that means there's opportunity. But again, if we don't have these unique types of transit modes, such as BRT, we will not be successful. We will not see businesses come to our areas and put stakes in the ground. Next slide. Finance and commerce. Transit is a development magnet. When we concluded our transit study, one of the recommendations that came out is when big development projects are being looked at or in the planning stages, having a real robust transit plan focusing around these development projects is going to be key, because we need to be able to get in and out and be able to bring workers to these jobs where they can be gainfully employed. Next slide. So again, our members and our community partners said more and better public transit is one of their top priorities. And yes, this was pre-COVID pandemic, but as we're out visiting our businesses again, this is top of mind when they start bringing back their employees. Couple of notes: we represent well over 650 businesses and community partners throughout Dakota County. Dakota County right now, and I know Commissioner Liz Holberg is on the meeting as well, but I believe we're well over 450,000 residents. Next slide, please. So our employers felt very strongly that we invest and we look at different ways to increase our transit opportunities and to bring recommendations forward. And we raised money through our foundation to fund our study. And you'll see some of who these partners are, our regional employers from Ecolab, Blue Cross, Blue Shield, Prime Therapeutics, Thomson Reuters, Vikings. Next slide, please. So Dakota County businesses want BRT, and we feel from our chamber perspective, BRT is a great mode to move people throughout down West St. Paul on Robert Street. And you'll see the reasons why. All of the commercial on South Robert Street also requires workers. There is not an overlay of high-paying jobs, so transit-reliant workers are abundant. BRT on South Robert Street would also allow those from the Rice area to come to West St. Paul to work, shop, and vice versa. And finally, bus rapid transit on South Robert Street will serve a lot of people and help those businesses in West St. Paul with additional shoppers. Next slide. And what I have seen and heard and what we know is bus rapid transit works. It's fast, it's predictable, it's reliable, and it's high quality. And when you look at these qualities, this is what our Dakota County businesses strive for. Next slide. So that is it. Thank you very much. I just want a quick shout out to my representative, Steve Elkins. It's good to see you, Steve. And thank you very much. And thank you, committee members and Chair Hornstein and Newman.
Thank you so much for your testimony, Ms. Gallen-Fowler. Members, we have one more testifier, and then we can go to Q&A from members for our public panel, including Senator Bingham's question. And next up, we do have a good friend of many of ours, our former colleague, Dakota County Commissioner Mary Liz Holberg. And members, wanted to just identify that it's my understanding that Commissioner Holberg has a specific area of interest here, and in the side-by-side that is R162, it's a Senate provision, and Commissioner Holberg has shared with me not only recently but over many months her concerns regarding some of the ways in which the Orange Line is funded in particular, and some of the responsibilities of Dakota County to that effect. So obviously, Commissioner Holberg, a warm welcome to our conference committee, and you can address that issue and anything else that's on your mind today. Welcome.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Chair. And I recognize that it's a little inartful to come before the House meeting and advocate for a Senate-only position. But given our history and relationship and your willingness to always work on these issues, I appreciate it. So,
and Commissioner, thank you. And we're taking a few Senate-only provisions. I think we've done that already. So, but please, we welcome your testimony, and I'm glad you're here with us.
Certainly, and I'm very highly aware of the long history around various types of transit, how they're funded, how they come to be. We have a very torturous history in the metropolitan area around transit development and funding, and none of that is lost on me. But it's not just been a matter of months, but a matter of years in which I believe that the Orange Line is more closely aligned in substance and operation to the arterial BRTs as opposed to the light rail and commuter train models. And the Orange Line was envisioned long before there was arterial BRT, and was put into place, as Peter mentioned, as a very cost-effective solution in the most highly traveled commuter corridor in the region. And at the time, the capital costs for this option were about 10% of a rail line. And there was the added benefit of additional capacity on the 35W corridor for off-peak by implementing the MinPass, the additional lane. So for a very small investment, not only was there a great opportunity for effective transit options, but it also increased the capacity of the corridor off-peak for motorists and put in place a MinPass option for rideshare riders. And so the ask that Dakota County is making, and it would also affect Hennepin County, is that Met Council would assume the total operating subsidy for this busway. I mean, what I keep saying, and poor Charles Carlson has heard this more times than he wants, is just give us a letter. We don't want to be a color. Give us a letter. Lay the RANG on the Scrabble board and leave the O. I mean, so, and in fact, the Met Council currently does pay the entire operating subsidy on the other freeway busway, that being the Red Line. So, I mean, there are lots of elements that would support the Dakota County position. And I think Hennepin County is supportive as well, as is the I-35 Solutions Alliance for this initiative. But these busways don't result in the same type of redevelopment. I mean, in past legislative sessions, there's been bills that would capture increased revenue from property taxes and investments in corridors like we see with the Green Line and the Southwest. These highway BRTs don't have that same degree of potential that accrues, the state investment in the light rail lines accrue a a significant benefit in property tax revenue to the local communities that have those types of transit investments. And these BRTs, whether they're on the freeway or the ABRT, are a bargain. And with constrained cost, you know, I mean, I don't, at 10% of the cost, I mean, I think that the operating subsidy for these very cost-effective solutions should be borne by the Met Council and the region. And in fact, it may then incentivize some of the other areas to look at BRT as an option or a model. If in fact even, I mean, I know I don't want to upset my good friend Carla Bingham, Senator Bingham, but you know, maybe it's time that we evaluate a BRT option or a cost effectiveness against some of the guideways being proposed to see whether or not we can get more bang for our buck in doing more BRTs, because I do believe that they're very cost effective. I don't know what's going to happen for the choice rider with the concerns about ridership safety and the change in work patterns. But I think absent even those issues being resolved, these BRT lines have a lot of chance for success, and they really serve very, very well the transit dependent community that we're trying to serve as well. So I'd be happy to answer any questions, take any criticisms.
Well, thank you so much, Commissioner Holberg, and thank you for, you know, my freshman year in 2003, we worked together on some of the early studies of what eventually became the Orange Line and then the Urban Partnership Agreement a few years after that. So I appreciate all of your work and really helping to be a pioneer in promoting this method of this mode of transit.
Well, and actually to that point, I think I should make another point. There is very broad bipartisan, bicameral support for these types of investments, and there's value to that. It avoids the lurching back and forth and the uncertainty, and you know, if there's something that everybody can get behind, it would diminish some of this conflict that seems to have thwarted or at least impeded our ability to have a regional vision for transit in our area.
Very well said, Commissioner Holberg. Thank you so much. Members, what I'd like to do now is we've heard from the Metropolitan Council, we've heard from several different members of the public and Commissioner Holberg. I'd like to open it up for any member questions of any of the folks that have testified. And I know we have a question queued up from Senator Bingham as well. So let's start with Senator Bingham. You're the only hand I see up at this point.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And it's always so good to see Commissioner Holberg. I always learn a lot from her, and couldn't agree with her more on this issue related to BRT and just how much of a bang for our buck we get from it. I mean, the data is clear. The language that we're discussing or that's referenced here is Senator Duckworth's bill that I'm a co-author on, as well as Senator Housley, for this reason, because we need to build out bus rapid transit for all the reasons that many of these wonderful testifiers have said. I will say that the original bill as introduced is the bill that I support for the reason that you look at the maintenance costs of the Gold Line, which, you know, is the line that goes through Ramsey in Washington County, is actually the operational cost of the Gold Line out in 2025, according to Met Council, is actually less than the Orange Lines. And yet the Gold Line is on, it's a blend of dedicated and guideway BRT, where, red line and orange line are not. And I think if there's anything that this committee comes away with, and I want to be crystal clear, letters and colors with rubber wheels need to be treated the same. And that will help every single county in the metro area. It'll help us in a cost-effective, efficient manner build out this transit line in a bipartisan, bicameral, agreed way. So that's what I want to say. And it is always near and dear to my heart to get a county's perspective. And that's what Mary Liz and I both have this unique experience where we both, now we've flipped, where I was on the county and now I'm up here, and now she was up here and now she's over there in the county. So it's kind of a unique blend. And we're both in the two fastest growing counties in the metro area. And so we need to do this, members, and the time is now. And so I would support, as introduced, the Duckworth bill. And I know that we will be able to get a lot of support for that and a lot of good bang for our buck.
Thank you, Senator Senator Bingham. I know that we are very interested in exploring the variety of issues around the interaction between Met Council and the counties. This is not the only provision in our legislation around this. I don't know, Commissioner Holberg, if you wanted to make any additional comments on, I think it was more of a comment, Senator Bingham, and I don't know if the Met Council would want to weigh in on anything that you've said. I would just invite either Commissioner Holberg or the Met Council perhaps to respond if they so choose. Okay, I will, well, Representative Elkins has a question or comment. Representative Elkins.
Yeah, it's more of a comment as well. And, coming from the perspective who's been someone who's been a city person, a Met Council person, and is now a legislature. I think that what this is bringing up for us to think about is that we evolved to this kind of strange hybrid funding model, for regional transit, mostly out of the detritus of the failed CTIB experiment. And we may need to just basically step back, take a big picture view about, transit funding for the region, and if this hybrid, regional and county combined method still makes sense anymore. I think that needs to be on the table.
Yeah, I mean, I have to say that Representative Elkins, that, for a variety of reasons, I think there's been a lot more attention being paid to the way in which we fund transit in the region and governance issues. I know that Senator Bingham has ideas, Representative West, Senator Dibble, myself, we're fairly partial to an elected Met Council. I know you have ideas, Representative Hausman has ideas. I hope that maybe moving forward after this session or after the first part of our biennial session is over, perhaps in the summer and fall, we can work with the Legislative Commission on Metropolitan Governance and build on some of the work that's been done by the Blue Ribbon Commission that Commissioner Holberg chaired, in fact, and see if there's some other governance ideas that we can put on the table. So thank you for that, Representative Elkins. And again, Representative Elkins, a former Met Council member, knows a lot about this topic. Okay, I don't see any additional hands. So yes, Commissioner Holberg.
Yeah, and I just, to that point, I think that the other problem that we've had is that the Met Council appointed by the governor lurches from administration to administration and reflects the governor's agenda, not necessarily a consensus built across the region. And so while at this point, the legislature making some of these decisions it has the broadest, range of representation. We saw CTIB fail in that even in the beginning, only 5 of 7 counties joined CTIB to begin with. And from one administration to the next, Met Council tends to move a governor's agenda, not a consensus regional agenda. So, I think that there are some major structural problems that have got us to the point that we are, and that any effort to try and address some of those challenges, I think, would be welcomed by the whole region.
I by and large agree with
Representative Elkins. Representative Elkins, you have.
I by and large agree with Mary Liz's comments.
Okay, thank you, Representative Elkins. And again, I have sensed some growing momentum around this, over the last year or so, even 6 months. So
Mr. Chair.
Senator Bingham.
Thank you. I would say, and I obviously agree with what Commissioner Holberg said, and I just think like counties will always want to be at the table, but language that's in this bill is not fair, and it is not with the counties at the table. And so, you want to get you want to solve this issue. I couldn't agree more with what Commissioner Holberg said, where it appears due to the governance of Met Council that the legislature actually is going to be in a better form to make some of these decisions. And so to me, I think we do need to have a serious discussion about governance and enough with the blue ribbon stuff. And let's just make a decision about it probably next year, and we'll get some better results when there's more accountability versus it being an administration. So I just wanted to second that comment by Commissioner Holberg.
Why don't we give Chair Zelli? I see that you are you've turned your camera on, and there's been a lot of comments made here. So maybe I don't see any other additional member hands, but Chair Zelli, I am going to give you the last word here, and then we'll move on to Representative Jordan's testimony.
Well, thank you, Chair Hornstein. And I don't want to weigh in on what is a long-lasting debate on governance and accountability. And I acknowledge and respect Commissioner Mary Liz Holberg, who chaired our Blue Ribbon Committee, who came to some pretty good conclusions about continuity. And I think there's a lot of good points all these ways. I do want to at least take the moment, maybe for some historical perspective, to just kind of respond to the orange line, which is just important, at least to get on the record. And in that, I'm going to actually defer to Judge Shetton, who I was in the community caring about transit, but the Judd was closest to it. So, just to give a perspective, Judd, maybe you can kind of give us it briefly, and I don't want to take everybody's time, but just going to give a thought as to why the orange line is funded in part by counties and why the red line is not, because that's there's a reason for that.
Well, thank you, Chair Zelli. So we will give Mr. Shetton the last word.
There it is.
All right. Well, thank you, Mr. Chair and members, and hello to Commissioner Holberg. Commissioner Holberg and I spent a lot of time last fall working on that Blue Ribbon Committee, and so I want to thank her again for that. I just would like to provide a little bit of history related to the orange line, and Representative Holberg does. I guess former representative, commissioner, you got all kinds of titles. I apologize, but the orange line is a remnant of the CTIB dissolution from back in the 2017 legislative session. And during that legislative session, as we were in the process of dissolving CTIB, there was an agreement that the Met Council would take over the operations of the red line, and that the counties would be responsible for the orange line moving forward. And so that is the distinction between why the one colored BRT line is has its funding provided by the state and Met Council, and the Orange Line has a county participation. And just to add a little bit more detail is that the breakdown of the operating costs for the Orange Line are 50% from the state, and then 86% from Hennepin County and 14% from Dakota County. And over the course of the fiscal year 22-23 biennium, we believe that will end up being about a cost of about $4 million. And Mr. Chair and members, I just want to point out that those $4 million costs would be in addition to the loss of our general fund in the Senate bill. And then on top of that, the committee or the House, the Senate bill also removes our MVEST revenue that we receive as well. So there's a bit of a piling on at this point. And I just want to point out that when Commissioner Holberg makes that point, she is correct that this would be the only BRT line that is not funded by the Met Council, but that is because of the agreement that was put in place when the county's Transit Improvement Board dissolved back in the fall of 2017, and it was part of the budget agreement in spring of 2017. So thank you for letting me clarify that, and it's nice to see you, Chair Holberg, and I'm sure we'll continue to talk about this.
Thank you, Mr. Shetman. And just one last, I'm going to have one last call for any questions or comments from anyone on the call. Seeing none, I want to thank everyone who participated in the ABRT discussion, which we have one more piece to today to get to, but I thought this was really very, very helpful. And as close as I am to this issue, I'm always learning new things when people testify. And I thought a really good case was made. I know it'll be valuable to the conference committee moving forward as we discuss the transit provisions in the bill before us. So with that, we have one final item, and I invited Representative Jordan to come today because when Chair Newman and I were discussing the agenda for today, and as you can say, as you know, we talked a lot about arterial bus rapid transit, but we incorporated some of Commissioner Holberg's concerns, and that is before us as a conference committee, as was mentioned, a Senate provision. We have a House provision that I think will be useful for all members to learn more about. And so to honor Chair Newman's request, we have invited my colleague from Minneapolis, Representative Jordan, who will discuss a House provision. Members, you may recall several years ago, the legislature created a TIF district in the city of Minneapolis for the purposes of funding a streetcar project. And there is interest now in, and so there were restrictions on that TIF district. My understanding, and of course Representative Jordan will get into this, that those restrictions prohibited other modes of transit from being considered. And so given the strong interest now, and I think you know why, if you hadn't been familiar with the arterial bus rapid transit up until now, you can see why there's a strong interest in pursuing that. And so Representative Jordan's bill simply allows for this TIF district to consider bus rapid transit. So that's why it's very topical for today. That is a House provision. I hope that we can get support from the other side of the aisle on this. And Representative Jordan will tell us why. So welcome to the House File 1684 Conference Committee. Representative Jordan, state your name for the record, and we will hear your testimony.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. My name is Sydney Jordan. I'm the state representative from 60A, which is Northeast Minneapolis and Southeast Como. I'm really pleased to have this opportunity to discuss the provisions that started out as House File 602. As Chair Hornstein said, they were included in the House language, and this amends the Minneapolis Streetcar Value Capture Fund to be used for construction of other transit ways, including bus rapid transit. Currently, we can only use this funds for streetcar construction and operation, like Chair Hornstein said. The heart of my district is Central Avenue. It's beautiful and vibrant. On Central Avenue alone, my constituents can visit their local library, shop for groceries, pray at their church or mosque. They can take care of their health by visiting their doctor, dentist, and pharmacist. And you can also eat your way around the world at local restaurants. The thing that's missing, though, is modern, fast, and timely transit. And I know I'm standing between you all and your start of your weekend, which is probably mostly just making phone calls. And you've heard from many incredible activists on the importance of BRT. So since the Chamber of Commerce and the Sierra Club both talked about the why, I'll focus on some of the how, which is the streetcar fund. This fund was created to finance a streetcar, as I said, on Hennepin and Nicollet Avenues in Minneapolis and going up Central to 18th using a value capture model from local parcels. All of those parcels are located within the city of Minneapolis. The streetcar never materialized. So this language seeks to expand the allowable uses of this fund to pay for other transitways or busways, including the newly proposed F line, which would connect my community to downtown Minneapolis and our northern suburbs and the jobs that Mr. Zelli and Mr. Carlson discussed. So I also have with me Jenny Hagar from our city's Public Works Department on hand to answer any technical questions. Members, the last thing I will just really want to emphasize for folks is that this is something right now we are only able to use this fund for streetcars. So this is actually a bill that would expand our use of transit options, including bus rapid transit, which is something that I personally want as a transit rider, and it's something that I hear overwhelmingly from constituents on. It's something that I've worked with various stakeholders on. It's something that you heard quite a bit from Representative Cagle on what it would mean for her constituents and communities just north of my district in the suburbs. So this is a really win-win way for us to expand our options and use money that already exists from TIF districts within Minneapolis to fund BRT. So members, it might be easier for you to just ask questions to understand a little bit more about it, but it's a rather short bill where it really just seeks to amend this already existing program and use it for more transit options. So I don't know, Mr. Chair, if you want to ask questions or if anyone else does.
Yeah, thank you very much, Representative Jordan. And so I will open it up to see if any members have questions about this particular provision. Chairman Newman.
Mr. Chairman, thank you. Representative Jordan, you have to excuse my ignorance. I'm from out in cornfield country, so I'm not familiar with this particular funding source for this fund. Could you explain it to me in a little bit more detail so that I understand the source of the funds and more specifically, you want to expand it from streetcars. I get that, but expand it to what besides streetcars and busways?
Representative Jordan.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Senator Newman. I actually think our Public Works Director, Ms. Hagar, could do a much better job of explaining some of where the districts are and the parcels and how that would work. And the language as it is expands it to transitways, which could be a busway, it could be other modes of transit, but it specifically also allows it to be used for buses in addition to streetcars, which is where it's currently at. But perhaps Ms. Hagar could go into more of those details about how the city will actually implement this.
Mr. Chairman, before we do that.
Chair Newman.
And Representative Jordan, I appreciate that, passing the question off to the expert. I appreciate that. But does your bill, House File 602, does that include guideways or is it just busways?
Representative Jordan. Oh, unmute.
Yep.
Yes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Senator Newman, it does include guideways. So the language in the engrossment is a transit line is defined as any of the following: a busway and a guideway as the terms are defined in statute already. So this could also be regular route bus service.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Representative Jordan. And so if Ms. Hagar is on the line, welcome, and please state your name for the record and proceed with your testimony to answer Chairman Newman's question. Welcome.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and committee members. My name is Jennifer Hager. I'm the Director of Transportation Planning and Programming for the Minneapolis Public Works Department. I'm not the finance expert on the value capture district, but I can answer some higher level questions. And if there's more detailed questions, our Intergovernmental Relations Department and I are happy to follow up on those following this committee meeting. The value capture district was established in 2013 by the City Council. It was also authorized by Hennepin County in 2013. And it is defined as one block on either side of our entire project area, focusing in on 5 parcels within that area. So taking the base tax value in 2013 for those parcels, and then this tool allows us to capture those tax increments above that base value and use it for what was, aimed to be a streetcar corridor, and what we're hoping now with this change in legislation would allow us to fund a transit corridor with a mode to be determined.
Thank you, Ms. Hager. Chairman Newman, did you have a follow-up question?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. No, that does answer my question. Thank you very much, Ms. Hager.
Excellent. Let me again scan our participant list and see if we have any further questions. I don't see any. Representative Jordan, did you want to have any concluding comments? I'll just simply say that this is a idea that I strongly support. I think it allows the city a lot more flexibility, and as Representative Jordan mentioned, I think the reason this is before us today is this would really allow, it'd be very helpful for funding the F line. And, that TIF district that's being described was also, we needed to get, or the city of Minneapolis needed to get enabling legislation from the state to allow that. So that's where this interacts with the state legislature. That's why Representative Jordan is before us, because this is not something the city or the county can unilaterally do. They will need permission from us, the state legislature, to allow for this additional flexibility. So that's why this bill is very important, and I appreciate your bringing it to us. Any final comments, Representative Jordan?
Mr. Chair, it looks like Representative Cagle might have a question.
Okay. Sorry, I did not see your hand up. Vice Chair Cagle.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And I apologize for my shaky computer. I had to lock myself in a bedroom away from the construction noise. So, but you kind of just made the point that I wanted to make about the about how this provision would kind of help the entire quarter of that F line. And so even though it's a Minneapolis provision, it'll really help build out all the way out into Anoka County, and actually, right in my front yard, apparently. And so I just really think that this is an important thing that, and a common sense thing that we can do to kind of help facilitate some of this build out of these lines.
Thank you, Vice Chair Cagle, and thank you for your advocacy too, and pointing out that, again, these lines are multi-jurisdictional, and so what we do here potentially that would be assisting Minneapolis would also be assisting the other communities along this proposed corridor. So now, Representative Jordan, I don't see any additional hands, so you can make any concluding comments you'd like.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you for allowing me to talk about this. This is a proposal that is really important for not only my community, but also Representative Cagle's community, your community as well, Mr. Chair. It's something that you said that the city can't do alone. I think that this is a bill that members of all different kinds of transportation philosophies can really get behind. If you want to expand BRT, this is a great bill and a great language that you should support. If you are concerned about the rise of streetcars, this is a way to make sure that we are having other options beyond streetcars available for the city of Minneapolis that makes sense. If you want to make sure you're connecting people with jobs, or other community amenities, this is a great provision to support. It also doesn't have a cost. This money is already there. The TIF district is only affecting people in Minneapolis who would be using the bus and the other transit ways that it could provide. So thanks for the opportunity. Please feel free if people have other questions or follow-up, let me know. Really happy to be available for members of this committee to talk about this proposal or anything else. So thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, members.
Thanks so much, Representative Jordan. I appreciate your taking the time to be with us this afternoon. So members, that concludes our agenda for today, and appreciate everybody, all of the testimony, all of the guests that we had today. Your time and your expertise is much appreciated. Before we adjourn, I wanted to hand it over to Chair Newman, and he can make an announcement about our future meeting, our meeting tomorrow, and I can then talk a little bit about what we hope to do on Monday. So, Chair Newman.
Mr. Chairman, first of all, to you and all of the speakers that were on today, I just want to express my appreciation. It was really a good learning experience for me. I can tell you I've taken over 2 pages of notes, and I listened very closely to what was being said. So again, thank you very much for the lesson. I really think it's important to the negotiations as we move forward. Insofar as the conference committee is concerned, we will not be meeting tomorrow. You have the weekend off. I think that Chair Hornstein and myself are going to be in contact with one another, and well, as we continue to move forward, we're a little handicapped in getting to the very difficult stuff simply because we don't yet have our targets. But I'm hopeful that we will have them soon. But in the meantime, we will be working amongst ourselves this weekend, and but you get to take the weekend off. As far as Monday is concerned, I have transmitted to, or will very shortly, a list to Chair Hornstein of some suggestions for what we could talk about on Monday and hopefully vote on some more matters. It is in Chair Hornstein's hands to make that determination, but I think that we'll probably have a pretty full day on Monday in terms of addressing some of the more controversial policy issues that hopefully we can clear up. No word yet on Tuesday. I just don't know at this point yet. So thank you, members. Chair Hornstein.
Thank you, Senator Newman. And I wanted to also thank you, Chair Newman, for your interest in learning more about bus rapid transit. And I do feel it was a very helpful and productive day that we had on that topic. And as you point out, Chair Newman, it'll be important as we discuss various provisions, many of which address or related to testimony that we heard today. So members, I concur with Chair Newman. Me and the chairman will be in close contact over the weekend. And on Monday, we do hope to resume our line by line, provision by provision conversations, hoping to adopt more of those provisions on Monday. And again, our meeting on Monday will be at 1 p.m., our usual time on Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. And a reminder again, no meeting tomorrow. And with that, members, I wish you a very good weekend, a very happy Mother's Day to those who celebrate, and we honor our mothers, and look forward again to our upcoming meeting, our next meeting, Monday at 1 p.m. With that, we are adjourned, members.
Thank you.